Thank you, Matt, and thanks for having me. Hey, my name is Christian, I'm with Urban, and since we have such illustrious speakers talking about fluid dynamics, I thought maybe I give an intro because we recently did an animation featuring a car chase, well, a menacing joyride really, and one of the shots was a burnout sequence that we did with fluid dynamics in Unreal. And I thought maybe it would be fun to recreate that shot on a very basic level, of course. The whole animation is only 3 minutes, so let's just give it a watch. Again, that whole animation was done in Unreal 5.4, I believe. Fluid dynamics were still experimental. It's basically Epic's way of saying don't use it in production. Something we completely ignored, of course, and had tons of crashes. Well, it was just for one shot, to be fair. It's as of 5.7, I believe it's in beta, a lot more stable. So without further ado, let's jump into Unreal. So here we are inside Unreal. As you can see, I prepped some stuff. Let's go through it quickly, what I changed from the default scene. Basically just added a content feature pack, the vehicle one. So we get a nice sports car we can use. I animated the sports car chassis, well, an empty actor, and then parented it, made the sports car chassis a child of that actor, and animated the wheel. I also activated the plugin we need. Unreal comes with tons of features, and sometimes they're experimental or beta, sometimes they would just bloat the project too much, so they organize all the additional stuff in plugins. And if we search for fluids, you find the Niagara Fluids plugin. You have to activate and then restart the engine, because plugins only load on startup. But that's basically all I did, apart from saving that new map and moved stuff out of the way so we don't get distracted. I also did a level sequence. If you're not familiar, this is where you animate stuff inside Unreal. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is right-click and add a Niagara system. Inside the fluids presets, we're going to choose moving grid fire. And if we chuck that into our scene, it looks like this. I'm constantly amazed by this. I mean, this is real time. And watch this. If I add a basic shape, it interacts with basically every collider in your scene by default. Isn't that amazing? Maybe I should give you a quick primer about fluid dynamics in Unreal. So the red box you just saw is basically voxelizing space. So if this voxel down here says, I'm super hot, and everything that's inside my box I push upwards, and that voxel up here says, well, I'm cold, so everything that enters my box I'm pushed downwards. And the voxel in between, interconnected to both of them, can say can create this intricate movement because of that. As you can imagine, this is computationally super expensive. This is what this red box represents. One of Unreal's tricks to keep things snappy is only voxelize the space you really need for your fluid dynamics simulation. And we can change this down here. Let's change it to, let's say, 300. If I would impart some tips and tricks in this talk, this would be trick number 1. Fluid dynamics is resolution dependent, so keep that in mind. With that being said, let's jump into the Niagara system. So let's go in the content drawer into our Niagara system. And we greet it with this interface. Actually, let's make that a tab. So it looks simple enough. There's our emitter. There's timeline down here. We can pause and start. And then we untwirl it and are greeted with more settings that are atoms in the universe. Super intimidating. So let's close that down, so not to get scared. Luckily enough, I think Epic thought the same thing, and they gave us a summary with all the settings we really need, so we don't have to untwirl it ever again. My trick number 2 would be keep to the basics. In our simulation tag, we have density, which is our smoke, temperature, which is our fire. We have dissipation rate, where is it? Down here, which is how fast, how long our smoke lingers. We have our source, which is by default a sphere, again a performance issue. And we can change that to, we will change that in a second actually, to make it another emitter. And we have forces, different turbulent forces that we can apply to change the look of our fluid dynamics quite dramatically. With these 5 things I just mentioned, I think you should be fine with in most cases. So before you go into all of that other stuff, just play around with density, temperature, turbulences, and obviously your source. So what we are going to do is basically have a tire emit particles in one emitter, and then tell our fluid dynamic simulation to use those particles to emit smoke. So let's start by adding this other emitter. Let's base it on another preset called minimal. It's basically your most basic emitter you can think of. This emitter is going to spawn the particles on our tire, so we need to tell it to use a mesh reproduction sprite. initialize. And then in the second step, we have to update this reproduction sprite. Updates. Let me explain. An emitter is organized in different groups. You start by spawning the emitter itself, then updating the emitter or tell it what to do after it's spawned. Then you spawn your particles. Then you tell them what to do after the spawn, like how to update it. And then there's stuff like render, how to render the particles on screen. And this is why we have to initialize our mesh reproduction sprite first and then update it later. And I just now realized we're not emitting any particles, so let's change that. In the emitter update, let's add a spawn rate. It's basically just emit that many particles per second. Let's do 1,000. We're going to animate that later in the sequencer. And in here we would set our skeletal mesh, but there's a neat trick, so we don't have to do that. Back in our level, again, we don't see anything because the system at the moment doesn't know that there which skeletal mesh to use, but we add a component to a skeletal mesh component to our Niagara system. So let's whoops, come on, let's select our skeletal mesh wheel, go to our Niagara system, add it as a component, skeletal mesh. I think we have to force a update, and now we see some particles. Nice. So at the moment there is spawning 1,000 particles spawn on that wheel, on the surface of that wheel. It also works, maybe I should explain components. Everything in Unreal is organized in components. Think of your object as the cupboard, basically, and the components are the different shelves with stuff in it, like a skeletal mesh comes as a skeletal mesh component. Your logic for your game comes in a component. Your Niagara system itself comes as a component inside that object. So that's why we added it as a component. You hear that all the time in Unreal. Funny enough, we're going to delete that component because I want to show you that it also works with children. So if we make this wheel I animated earlier a child, no, it's the other way around actually. Make the system a child of that skeleton mesh, it spawns. It realizes they want to use this skeleton mesh as a source. At the moment we have a problem though, because this is animated, it rotates, our whole Niagara system rotates with it. But there's a neat trick. We just basically tell it to use location and rotation as world space. And because that doesn't change, our wheel now can turn, and our Niagara system doesn't. Actually, if I activate our fluid simulation, we should see... Oh no, we don't see smoke yet, but because we have to tell our gas emitter to use not the sphere source, but our new emitter called minimal. And now, voila, we emit It's on fire. Actually, let's make this radius bigger so you see it more clearly. And again, it works just like that. We can even move it and it animates the movement as well. So now it's basically just connecting everything and tweak our fluid simulation. So let's go back to our Niagara system. Actually, let's tear it off so we see it both at the same time. Zoom in here. We don't need the sprite render anymore. It's distracting. I mean, the particles still spawn, they're just not rendered. And let's concentrate on our fluid simulation. Maybe rearrange some stuff so that you can see better. This goes over here. Yeah, I think we're good. So in our simulation, let's kill the temperature. So we have only smoke. Then I think the smoke is way too dark. So let's change the density albedo to 0.8, the albedo of snow. Then actually, I want to introduce you to some CVARs. Fortunately, or unfortunately, you can do a lot with CVARs, control variables in Unreal. It's a deep rabbit hole we don't want to go into, but I think there's two neat ones that we can use here. So let's just go with it. You set console variables down here. Again, there's tons. So let's search for heterogeneous volumes and indirect lighting and activate this by setting it to 1. And then we're going to use the indirect mode set to single scattering by setting it to 2. And I think that looks a lot more like the smoke I would expect from the burnout. What's next? It's obviously way too much at the moment, especially, let me play that animation. Whoa. Let's go back into our, did I close my Niagara system? I did. So let's set the radius back to something smaller, to 1. Ah, that looks nice. Let's tweak it by using the turbulence I mentioned before. So in forces, the forces tab, we have different turbulences. Let's just, for simplicity's sake, let's just use 2. And let's, you can't see both at the same time. There we go. Strangely enough, the larger this value, the smaller the turbulence. So let's make this smaller. And let's have it work only in the C direction. So against the direction of the car. Let's make it 1,000 so you see what it's doing. Actually, let's set the radius back to something ridiculously high so you actually see the difference better. So in the minimal emitter in the fluid source, I'm going to set the radius to 3. And then if I activate the turbulence, or deactivate it first, and then activate it, see the difference? See how the turbulence are a lot smaller? Or we introduced smaller turbulence to the system. So let's lower this back again to maybe 100. And then introduce another turbulence, which is quite a lot larger, like 0.01. And to demonstrate, I will also set it to 1000. It's too much smoke. You can't see anything what I'm doing. Let's just set this back to 2 maybe. And actually let's make the bounding box larger so you see the movement better. So let's set this to 2000 maybe. So it's a lot longer. And now we changed resolution. So let's compensate with upping the resolution max axis to 600. So back in the turbulence, if I deactivate this, reframe it so you can see it. So this is without, and this is with the turbulence. Quite a dramatic change, so let's use -200. And I think we're ready to connect it to our car. So we can just make this, again, I prepped it in advance so you don't watch me animate for a ridiculous amount of time because I'm not a good animator. Let's connect it to our null. Let's make this visible. Let's move our fluid simulation so it encompasses the whole. Whoops, what did I do? Let's go to the beginning. Let's move that one to over here. Let's have something like this. Okay, so another problem we have is that our sequencer at the moment doesn't know about the length of our particle system because it lives in the level, so it's meant to be basically emit all the time. So we want to tell the sequencer take care of that length. So in the Niagara system, we have to add a component first. Again, everything is a component, and then add a Niagara system live track. Use desired age. That's a topic for another talk. And as you can see at the moment, it emits all the time. So I'm going to change that. We just want to have it emit at the beginning and then gradually fade out as the tire gains traction. So how are we going to do that? In the sequencer, you can only animate user parameters. So we have to make a user parameter. Basically, we just swap the default spawn rate with our user parameter created one. It sounds complicated, but it's super simple. Let's open our Niagara system again. I'm struggling with screen space as usual. Down here we can add user parameters because our spawn rate is a float value we need to make our user parameter a float value as well. And let's call it spawn rate. Can even give it a default, which doesn't matter because we're going to animate it in a second. And then up here in our spawn rate, we can just exchange our... I keep hitting the mic, sorry. Should not have positioned it that way. We use for our user spawn rate. And at the moment, nothing should have changed. We hit play, because we're still emitting 1,000 particles per second. But now in the sequencer, in the Niagara component, we can tell it to use that spawn rate and then animate it by setting it to 0 first. Give it a keyframe. Whoops. Then maybe go to frame 15. Add a keyframe. Add emit 10,000. And then kill them later. Kill them here because they will still be alive for a few seconds. Actually, at the moment, they're alive. I think the default is 5 seconds. So that's too long. So let's go to the initialize particles. Yes, 5 seconds. And change it to 2. And now it should look like they are disappearing, which they are right over here. Yeah, looks somewhat realistic. Yeah, let's call it a day. I just noticed my wheel is in the wrong spot. Let's adjust that briefly. Looks better. Okay, so what's next? Let's look at it one more time. You might have noticed that it's not casting any shadows, so let's fix that next. We're almost done. Super close. And we have to do 2 things to make it cast shadows. I don't know where those lines are coming from. It's very odd. You can press G in the viewport and hide all gizmos, except for the draw bounds, because that's a user setting. We can kill that over here. Don't think we need it anymore. So to make the smoke cast shadow, we have to do 2 things. First, in the project settings, we have to activate shadow casting for heterogeneous volumes. It's off by default because of performance issues, I think. And then we have to tell our Niagara system to cast shadows as well. And now our smoke cast shadows. Maybe we can change the sun direction as well. If you hold Control L, you can change it interactively. How neat is that? Maybe have it lower in the sky, something like that. To wrap things up, I want to change 2 more things. Back in our grid gas emitter, I want to have the dissipation in our simulation a lot slower. By default it's 1. I want to set it so it lingers a lot longer. And let's see how that looks. And I wanted to show you how you can increase your resolution without changing the look dramatically by using the attribute resolution multiplier. What this option does is basically compensate for the added resolution by lowering all the values. Looks like this. There's too much smoke. I keep tweaking the smoke, I'm so sorry. Let's make the radius 1. See how that looks? 1.5. Yeah, I think we call it a day. And that's that. I hope I was able to convince you that fluid dynamics in Unreal is quite a worthy tool for your toolbox, and that you will give it a try if you haven't already. To be able to have fluid dynamics in the same package as you animate, I think is quite a neat workflow. Thank you again for listening to my talk, and I should be there to answer any questions if you have them.